What is up, fantasy people? You are back with the True North Fantasy Pod presented by Monkey Knife Fight. I am Trav, coming live and direct. Actually, we're not live. We're doing pre-records lately, but we are direct from the True North Fantasy Lair. In fact, another top secret location within the Fantasy Lair. So we'll leave that to the imagination. With me, as always, co-hosting and West Coasting and currently wrangling a little dog cameo that we have happening on the pod tonight. That would be Sullivan, but my co-host is actually Tyrell McLaughlin. How are you doing tonight, my man?
Living the dream. Dr.
Absolutely.
Doolittle it up.
Yeah, Dr. Doolittle indeed. Never know who's going to make an appearance in the fantasy lair. It's wild up in this bee. So championship week has unfolded, Ty. Hopefully all of our listeners got their W's. I know you and I had a little bit of heartbreak in the couple of championships that we were in. So forgive us if we're not going to spend too much time on that, folks. But just want to say that if anyone wants to check out the content from ourselves or the rest of the True North team, please go to truenorthffb.com. That's where all of the content is housed. All of the kind of hub pages for each of the shows. We have 4 shows weekly with the Sons of Dynasty, Gold Jacket Pod, and the Point After, along with ourselves. And so it's we're super thankful to have those guys on board, and it's definitely a different vibe when you have such a great team. It definitely kind of builds that camaraderie and kind of that motivation to go out and get it when you see the homies putting out a good show. So please go check that out. Anybody who likes our show, please go check out the other shows. Follow us on the socials at True North FFB, pretty much everywhere aside from Facebook. It's just the whole shebang, True North Fantasy Football. And lastly, please go and check out our merch either on the website or at veridianglobal.com. You can see my hat there looking crispy. We got the t-shirt back there, one of the OG hats right there. If you want to go get swagged out to the nines, check out Viridian Global and the Football Collective and the True North Fantasy Football Collection. So thanks to everybody who supported us that way, and just looking forward to another great 2022, Ty.
And we are, of course, very proud members of the Fantasy Points Media Group. And everybody should already have a subscription to that fantastic website. 25% off 2022 subscriptions right now on the website. So make sure you are taking advantage of that early bird special.
Absolutely, man. The early bird always gets the worm. And like we said, championship week was just this past week. So all sorts of people were scooping those worms out of the ground themselves, and congratulations to them. But we here on the True North Fantasy Pod tonight, Ty, are going to waste no time in getting into some dynasty content. There's going to be a little recap stuff for those who want a little bit of kind of analysis of some of the things that happened over 2021. There's going to be a little bit of that. But as we like to do, I think we've done this yearly. We're doing a bit of a State of the Union episode. Tonight, we're going to do quarterbacks, and we're actually going to make it a series. So we're going to go through all the positions the next few weeks and kind of give you a detailed rundown of the quarterback position, how it unfolded, and how we see it unfolding as far as dynasty values for these players. So I think it's cool because it's a little bit earlier than we usually do it, Ty. So we may end up doing another State of the Union after the draft and whatnot. But I think it's kind of, when we were laying out the show sheet, it was kind of fun to decipher these guys so early after the season while maybe our wounds are a little bit fresh, right?
No, and I'm sure a lot of people like what we plan to do is get ahead of some of the narratives that we see coming in this offseason. And that's kind of the name of the game when it comes to dynasty, is just being ahead of the trends, taking advantage of what we think the trends might do, and try to predict the market in fantasy, because the dynasty market is certainly a real thing, and it's palpable sometimes with just one person's tweet or something. So
100%.
It's something we try and get ahead of, and it's something where group thought can kind of take over and a consensus can build heading into an off season. So excited to get out some of the more important names at the quarterback position that I think have some questions that we have to answer heading into the offseason.
Absolutely. Yeah. In Dynasty, much like with that Fantasy Point subscription, it always pays to be the early bird. So you ready to get some worms tonight, Ty?
I am.
All right. You want to try one of my worms?
Let's all get worms.
You remember that? You remember that commercial back in the day with the candies, and the kid was like, "You want to try one of my worms?" That is one of those commercials that stuck with me for my entire life. And as you can tell, just about 33 years old, and I still got it in there.
Some people I ate too many chocolate bars.
Yeah, or for me, another one is it's not oatmeal. Those guys, clutch. Those guys are clutch. But anyway, Ty, we're going to get into this early dynasty quarterback talk. And it was a very interesting season for the quarterback position. Obviously, a lot of fluctuation, some new faces up near the top of the board, which we really like to see, especially for those superflex teams. There's a lot of intrigue and a lot of useful players and youthful players as well. So I'm really excited to talk about them. And I think one of the main ones that kind of sticks on people's minds right now, just because it kind of feels like there's still something untapped, would be Kyler Murray. And I think it was an interesting season for him. He did miss 3 games in the middle of the season right before their bye week with ankle issues. And I think that may have had a bit of he's had a good season, but I think those ankle issues may have been lingering and had a bit of an effect on him.
Same thing the year before.
Yeah, absolutely. And so right now he is the quarterback 10 on the year, but with those 3 games missed in a per game basis, he's actually the quarterback 4, Kyler Murray. And I think like before I went into this, I probably wouldn't have said that on a points per game basis, just because it doesn't feel like it's been kind of a spectacular season like what we saw last year. He seemed like he kind of took the league by storm. So I'm pretty curious, Ty, like, do you think Kyler would be classified as a sell high? Do you think maybe it depends on the perception of his season this year, or kind of how do you see that unfolding, and what would you be doing with him if you're a dynasty manager with him on your roster?
Well, I think this is one of the narratives. Like, you're going to hear high on Kyler Murray. I think disagree more. I think we should be using this as a window of opportunity to buy Kyler Murray. You talked about points per game. He scored 21 points per game since coming in the league. So, I won't argue with somebody who's taken Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, these guys ahead of Kyler Murray, but I think like he just had so much compared to a Lamar Jackson passing the ball, and Kyler just had such an advantage on the ground compared to like a Dak Prescott, even a Justin Herbert just doesn't have the same advantage with their legs. So Kyler has all the tools that we really chase, and he's just such a unique quarterback. He's unequivocally one of the handful of guys you can point to and say he's a true game changer for a fantasy team, I think. And, we all know elite quarterbacks have been, a part of league winning recipes here in recent seasons for fantasy more than ever before, kind of in complete contrast to like the late round quarterback approach that had been enforced for the last decade before that. Yeah. So, and a lot of analysts are still subscribing to that. Like, this is something we've been ahead of for the last couple of years, but it's something a lot of people are saying fade these high end quarterbacks. Cause I'm talking even from a startup position, I'm still very interested in grabbing Kyler pretty early. So, I'm a proponent of grabbing any quarterback relatively early, especially in dynasty, because there's a chance, the second half split is just like the year before. Like, maybe people are soured on him a little bit. So I don't think you have to pay prices like you would for a Pat Mahomes or Josh Allen right now. I think he's maybe a discounted version of those guys. And I'm talking 3rd or 4th round startup prices might be what you have to pay for him. And I find myself dipping into the quarterback pool, like, in that range to grab an elite quarterback sometimes in startups. They can be difference makers on your roster for like a decade straight. So very high on Kyler Murray, and this might be like the last pocket of time ever in which he is viable. I don't think he was even a couple months ago, right? When he was on, like, he was at the top of the 2021 MVP conversation at one point this year. But I love these. I don't see him playing baseball in half a decade or anything. I just don't have a lot of concerns with Kyler.
Yeah, no, I like everything that you said there. And I think, like, I don't disagree with you by any means that he is one of those few guys that has that crazy upside with both his legs and his arm. But I might, like, in a situation where I'm not necessarily a contender, if I have Kyler Murray, I think a lot of it does depend on that perception of league mates too, right? Because if I can get like a Joe Burrow and like a running back that can be useful on my roster, I might look at that if I need that because I believe in Joe Burrow, or say a Justin Herbert or something like that. Just because if that person is kind of, really excited about Kyler's rushing ability, they might be willing to pay up for it, and pay up for what you said could be that huge boom. Where if I don't think I'm getting too much of a dip at the quarterback I'm getting back, which would be a big thing, I would want one of those kind of young elite quarterbacks back. But that kind of leads me to the point where he might not necessarily be worth it unless you're getting that, right? And so I would really need that, or I'm just going to keep that upside from Kyler.
Yeah. And I always find that, like, getting a young guy in return, like we look at this rookie quarterback class, like we didn't exactly get a return on investment if we spent up on rookie picks for Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Trevor Lawrence especially. But and I also say, like, these guys, there's a lot of people who come with risk, and Kyler Murray comes with a little bit of risk, but the reward is so high, and we've seen it already. So I think it makes a lot of sense to go and buy up. It's almost like an elite tight end, an elite quarterback at this stage.
Yeah, for sure. And you talk about that reward. We saw it last year with those 11 touchdowns. And like, I don't think we should be blown away by the fact that there was a little bit of regression. In fact, if you listen to this very podcast, this guy to my left right here was calling for that right away. Like, that's going to be a big spot of regression. Don't be upset if it happens. Just hope for that passing game. But I think that's kind of still a vote of confidence for Kyler in that there's so much more room to go up for that. You know what I mean? He has under 500 passing attempts right now, which is pretty low, especially in a 17-game season. And then if you look at his rushing, that's even come down quite a bit. He averaged 51 yards per game last year. He's only averaging 34 yards per game rushing this year, and then 4 touchdowns to that 11. So we see where the little bit of a dip comes, but the guy is still the quarterback 4 on a points per game basis. So that just tells you that in any given season, you could have the quarterback 1 overall, and that's something that's pretty tough to give up. So
yeah, like
I
even
like what
in
you said there.
The dip this season, he's giving you basically a touchdown in 4-point 4-point per passing touchdown leagues. He's giving you like basically an extra touchdown with his rushing per game and what's considered a down season in that
for sure
aspect.
So with quarterbacks like that, Ty, like those rushing quarterbacks who can kind of do a bunch on their own and have that floor on their own, would you downgrade the impact of changing weapons on that team? Because if you look at Kyler and the Cards, they've got free agents galore on that offense. James Conner at the running back position, but then from the pass catcher's perspective, they got AJ Green, Christian Kirk, Zach Ertz, who has been a pivotal piece of that offense since he got there. So those are all kind of big pieces of Kyler's pie from this season. Obviously, they'll make sure the cupboards are stocked to an extent. I would expect one of those wide receivers and maybe Ertz to come back. But what do you think happens with Kyler and the Cards skill positions? And then would you downgrade that as far as his profile of quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, they're part of the perception that, Kyler's a sell high, whatever's going on, whatever you think of Arizona, the loss of Nuke Hopkins has played a big part in that. Mm-hmm. And people are talking and they're saying, maybe Kyler can't do it without a very specific set of weapons. And I'm not offers a lot to these wide receivers. It leans heavily on the wide receiver position.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you that some of these guys will probably be back anyways. And Nuke's not even a spring chicken himself either, right? Like he's starting to get up towards that age apex. So yeah, I mean, I understand why somebody would let that factor into their decision making, but I think the same could be said for someone like Josh Allen, who is 100%. Probably comparable, who has Emmanuel Sanders and what's his face as free agents in Buffalo as well.
Beasels?
The Beasels, maybe.
Yep. Yeah, no, I like that. And I'm in the same boat too. Like, it doesn't really worry me too much for Kyler, just because I think with Nuke and replacement level wide receivers, like a healthy Nuke, right? I think he's going to be able to get it done. So yeah, much like you, I'm not really going to have a big impact because I do expect them to bring in players that he can probably lift up a little bit just with his play too. Okay, another guy that we were big on coming into this year, coming off an injury, stepping back into that Kellen Moore offense that we know and love, would be Dak Prescott. He's a quarterback 9 so far this season. And all this stuff is obviously through 17 weeks. Week 18, we'll probably count that later on in the offseason, but right now a full fantasy season is in the books, and so we're booking it. But Dak Prescott's the quarterback 10 in points per game, actually, where he's the quarterback 9 overall. So first, I just want to revisit, Ty, like that age-old question: is Dak Prescott an elite fantasy quarterback? What's your take on that?
I think it's debatable. Like, he's probably not, would be the answer. Like, he's probably the guy at the top of the next tier, even in Dynasty at this point. We love the array of weapons when we talk about that. The offensive line, we know, plays a big part in Dak's success or not having so much success. Excuse me. But going back to Kellen Moore, like, I think that has a lot to do with that. Hopefully when those two started their beautiful marriage here, Dak scoring 21 points per game as well, same as Kyler Murray. That's the 6th most amongst all quarterbacks. So I'm pretty impressed with Dak Prescott. I think he's like the highest floor quarterback out there too. Like,
good point.
It's just interesting. Like the most, I looked up, I think I tweeted out that the most 16 plus point per game fantasy seasons by a quarterback in their first 6 seasons of all time. It's just Dak Prescott, Andrew Luck, Cam Newton, and Russell Wilson who've done that in all 6 seasons to start their career. I know last year was really limited sample size, but we also saw the huge ceiling in that sample size.
He was on his way to a monster last year.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Amari Cooper, but we know CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup, of course, is a free agent. So there's some to shake out in the wash here in Dallas. But I think Dak Prescott's somebody who, even if he doesn't have weapons, he can add with his legs. And I think just to go back to Kyler Murray, that's, if James Conner leaves, it might be the best thing that could happen to a Kyler Murray who all of a sudden scores 5 more rushing touchdowns. So a lot of this, I think they can compensate because they have that added skill set. And I think Dak's a good example of that. Imagine if they were to make a move and get rid of Zeke somehow. So I just think Dak has that like 5 touchdown rushing floor almost, it feels like. And then what he adds in the passing game, I'm very optimistic will be closer to the last couple of years, what we saw with Kellen Moore compared to some of the stagnant offense we saw at times this year in Dallas.
Totally. And like Dak's maybe lack of rushing this year, obviously the guy's coming off a devastating leg injury. So he was probably little bit hesitant to take off and get popped. Maybe twist that thing. He probably didn't want to do that again. So I totally get that. I just kind of to bolster your point that those 5 touchdowns are probably still in his realm of possibilities if he gets that confidence back in using his legs, which we know he can use. And I think I was being a little bit nice with him in my answer to this to say that he brings an elite production profile for the non-rushing quarterbacks. You know what I mean? So once you get past your Josh Allen, Mahomes to an extent, he doesn't run as much as those guys, but he runs super effectively. And the passing production is so huge. And then you got Kyler and Lamar Jackson. And then Dak is in that next tier behind them, because in those guys, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for surrounding weapons. I'm looking for passing volume overall, and I'm looking for deep passing volume. And Dak pretty much has all of those. You mentioned CD. Amari's future is shaky, and Michael Gallup is a free agent, but the ancillary weapons and Dalton Schultz and Tony Pollard
Schultz might be too.
Yeah, I can't recall if they re-signed him. I know they re-signed like Jarwin to a big deal before that, but I think Dalton Schultz is back in the fold and will remain in the fold if I recall. But Tony Pollard too, like that guy could be a deadly slot receiver for them as well. I don't have to tell you that, but he's just an incredible piece, and he's looked great in the passing game. So I think Dak is well insulated there. He's top 10 in passing attempts so far, and along with that, he's top 5 in completions and completion percentage. Also top 10 in yards and touchdowns. So he's right up there with those guys, right? And that's kind of what you look for out of those non-rushing guys. And then for the deep passing, I think there's definitely a room for a bump in efficiency. You look at his completion percentage, and it's about 39% on those deep passes, but he is up there top 10-ish in deep passing volume. So that's encouraging with the weapons he's got. But yeah, I think there could be a bit of a bump in the efficiency there and the touchdowns, but he's still like right up in the top 12 in most categories where that's concerned. So I am definitely down for that. I think the 2 problems for Dak are the fact that, like we said, those quarterbacks around him have so much more upside than him. And the fact that if Kellen Moore gets a head coaching job, I think that could change quite a bit for this offense. Much like we talked about Josh Allen with Brian Daboll remaining there could have been one of the best things for him. Kellen Moore, I mean, the guy's going to jump at a head coaching position, and he's getting a little buzz. So that remains to be seen how that offense could unfold. See if Mike McCarthy takes a little bit more control, or if he brings some in. But we harmony with Kellen Moore, so I think that that could be another factor in this offense here too. Where do you have Dak ranked in Dynasty, Ty? Just as kind of a quick check-in.
I think he's like my quarterback 6 or 7. I don't have it right in front of me. I have him like below guys like Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, just because that age difference, I think, plays a little bit of a factor. But totally. Dak's definitely in that next tier with like some of the guys that I think we're going to talk about here pretty soon, and ahead, I think, of the rookie quarterbacks. Like I think I would take Dak Prescott in Dynasty over those rookie quarterbacks that we might touch on. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I definitely would. You've seen it with him, and the rookie quarterbacks are just so unknown so far. So I'm in the same boat. I have him at quarterback 7, just behind Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert myself.
Yeah, I'd like to see the Cowboys like insulate that offensive line a little bit in this offseason. Maybe bring back, maybe find a way to restructure Amari and bring back Gallup and try that like 3-headed monster wide receiver again.
Yeah, that's best case Ontario Ricky for sure. So let's move on to another seasoned vet in Russell Wilson. Obviously, it has not been a great season in Seattle this year. The offense, still at face value, looks like it's pretty loaded for him in that it's got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. That's kind of all you could ask for as a wide receiver duo for any quarterback. So we still don't hate that for Russell as far as potentially the future. Maybe you do, Ty, but curious to see if you think Russ is stuck in Seattle, or do you think that he is going to move on to a new destination this coming season?
Yeah, I don't know where to start with Russ. Like I tweeted out that thing. So 6 for 6, Dak did scored 16 plus fantasy points all 6 seasons to start his career, tied for the best ever. And I threw Russell Wilson was in that mix. And so I wanted to go further and see Russell Wilson just continues to do it. He's on pace to do it again this year. And that'll make his 10th season straight that he's gone. Like he scored 16 fantasy points for 10 of his career. It's just insane what's going on in Seattle. And if this is a dynasty show, he's kind of a tough nut to crack, I think, and always has been. Like, I still think Russ, he's a top 10 quarterback in dynasty, I think. Like, let's say that. And we all would love to see Russ in a different system, right? Like a head coach paired with him who's more reticent to unleash him. Like, let Russ cook, as kids say, or whatever. So
no doubt.
I get it, but he is in Seattle. And another thing I've tweeted out, like probably 5 seasons in a row, it feels like now, is the most consecutive seasons that teams have passed the ball under 575 times since 2010, which is when Pete Carroll took over for the Seattle Seahawks. And so the Seahawks have done that in 12 straight seasons. Every season Pete Carroll's been there, they've thrown the ball under 575 times. It's incredible. And you just don't see anyone else in the double digits except the Titans. But and Seattle's sitting at like 469 pass attempts this season, second lowest, just behind your Eagles. And it's bigger. Like, it's not just a run first philosophy. It's like Shane Waldron, the new offensive coordinator, was supposed to spark them in Seattle along with Pete Carroll's antiquated notions. So it's actually made things less conducive for fantasy. And a big reason is pace of play. Like, every team in the NFL has run at least 950 plays this year from scrimmage, except the Seattle Seahawks, who've run just 897 plays. So it's just frustrating because the Seahawks haven't been an elite football team in years now.
Yeah.
And the efficiency is still high in Seattle because their quarterback, Russell Wilson, is really good. And this just kind of all does come down to letting Russ cook, or like you alluded to, like seeing the only other thing we could hope for in dynasty to get him to like that elite status would be a change of locale. And, going back to last off season, there were infamous lists. It sucks because one of the teams was list, which seems unlikely, especially being in the NFC. Like, I think Chicago was on that infamous list. They drafted Justin Fields, of course. So it's hard. And then I think the Raiders were on the list. So they're interesting because, they're the only AFC team on the list, I think, at all. Somehow, if somehow Seattle was to part ways with Russ, they definitely try and avoid dealing them inside the conference.
I think so too.
But the Saints were on the list as well.
That's a nice destination.
They're definitely the most quarterback needy team that was on last year's list. I could only imagine the marriage between Russ Wilson and Sean Payton.
Yeah, he only likes short quarterbacks, man.
Yeah,
he only likes short.
True.
That's why he's playing a tight end at quarterback right now, is because he doesn't have a short quarterback to put in there.
I like
it. Bring him in, Sean Payton. Bring him in.
I think pinning down Russ's value is kind of tough though in dynasty. Like, the floor is high, I think, and the ceiling could be high, but a lot of pieces have to fall into place. And I think if he stays in Seattle, it sucks because we're almost running out of time. Like, when it comes to the sizzling Chef Boy-Russ style, like really letting him cook, because he's 33 now. So there's a chance that he begins to tail off over the next half decade, right? And there's a chance he doesn't either. So he's limited his hits, and he was almost invincible until this year, never hurt. And has Lord on his side. Just ask him. So
him and his boy Lockett, absolutely.
So he probably goes in round 7 in one draft in one quarterback leagues. Probably goes in round 8 or 9, 10 in other drafts. He's going to be one of those mid-range quarterbacks, and I think he is still a top 10 quarterback. He's right behind Dak Prescott in my rankings. I think not far behind him, and I'd probably take him over a Joe Burrow or something. I'd definitely take
Really?
him. Yeah, I think rookies too.
See, I must hate Russell Wilson. I have him at right around quarterback 12 behind the rookies. And I think it's all about where you sit on the rookies. And like, I just would probably dig the youth. Trevor Lawrence is a little bit questionable. Justin Fields, it's a really tricky one in there. We have to see obviously what happens as we shake through, but right now I have him right around quarterback 12 just because of the youth that's ahead of him. And I'm very bullish on Justin Fields for the future, and Trey Lance as well, obviously, and Joe Burrow for that matter as well. It seems like I have him much higher than you, so it's interesting. And we're going to get into him pretty quick, but I just want to kind of finish off with my take on Russell Wilson there, in that I think he is a buy low in Dynasty right now, because I think, especially if you're a contending team, 2021 is basically rock bottom for what we've seen from Russell Wilson. He's the quarterback 20 on the season this year. And in the 9 seasons prior to that, he's never been outside the top 12 quarterbacks. So that is a phenomenal stretch with the efficiency that you alluded to with Russ. And you've put out some really, really good stuff about Russ's efficiency, which has been fantastic. But this year it has not been the same. He wasn't cooking. Obviously, he's outside the top 20 in pass attempts, which he always is. But that drop in efficiency has been massive, Ty. He's barely going to hit 3,000 yards this year. His 22 touchdowns are still in the top 12, but it's a far cry from the 42 that he had last year and the 33 that he averaged in the 5 years prior. So that's a big dip in fantasy points when you take 10 passing touchdowns off of his game. But I think he could still be a buy low, because I think he probably settles somewhere in the middle on that. And even as he loses that mobility, which he's already kind of faded away from a little bit, I think he's got the IQ and kind of the accuracy and the ability to deliver without necessarily having to put the entire team on his back. So I think there's some situations out there that could be good for him. And I think the Saints would be a fantastic one, although I'm not necessarily sure that happens. All right, Ty talked about little Joe Burrow, so why don't we dive in a little bit? These last 2 weeks, he has arrived 1 week over 500 yards, 1 week over 400 yards against the Chiefs this past week in a nail-biting W for the Bengals, and 4 touchdowns in each game. So I think we finally saw some of the upside from Joe Burrow, and I'm just going to start with him, Ty, because I want to talk a little bit about his efficiency. It feels like he kind of stole that from Russell Wilson, kind of. I know I thought at the beginning of the season his ascension was going to be on the back of volume and those wide receivers, but it actually hasn't. It's been on efficiency and those wide receivers, and a little bit more commitment to getting Joe Mixon some damn targets too, which has been fantastic and a nice little safety blanket. But you look at it, and like Joe Burrow's volume is way lower than I expected. He's only got 520 pass attempts so far, and he's the only top 5 quarterback under 600. So he is way under those guys, and he is the quarterback 5 so far on the season. He's also the only quarterback in the league with a 70% completion percentage. Yeah. That's a minimum of 100% or 100 attempts. So basically any meaningful starter this season, Joe Burrow is the only one to hit 70% completions. So I think all of that's been fantastic. And I think for me, he's cemented himself at the very least as kind of a top 6 to 8 dynasty quarterback. I actually have him as my dynasty quarterback 5 right now, right behind those rushing guys, because I think the ascension's only going to continue, especially if they can add a little bit of volume to that passing game. He's a guy who could run 5 touchdowns in from time to time too. So I think Joe Burrow is one of those guys who, aside from those scary rushing production guys, he's probably the next guy for me. But I'm curious to what you think. Do you think he's here to stay, or do you think it might not be as rosy as you roll down for those bungles who are known to bungle good situations?
Yeah, speaking of the way, you think about it, got hurt in week 18, I guess this time, but we'll see Joe Burrow under a microscope too in the playoffs. That's exciting, and I'm sure Bengals fans are on pins and needles here after the Andy Dalton
shout out to Ellis.
And, I think one of the most heavily leaned upon narratives this week will be that the Bengals haven't won a playoff game in 31 years. So that's pretty amazing. So that's just to paint the picture of how much pressure Joe Burrow could feel heading into this week, next weekend's playoff matchups, but also a guy who can, he can puff a cigar in the face of the big stage, in my opinion. So yeah, I love me some Joe Burrow. I think if Joe Burrow added more with his legs, this would be an open and shut conversation, because do you have him ahead of Justin Herbert? There's somebody
just ahead of Justin Herbert.
So that's the guy that it would be, I definitely have and Dak too, I have ahead of Joe Burrow. So these are the two, like that's about the discrepancy there, I would say, because I have him as my quarterback 8 in Dynasty. And yeah, he would be a top 5 quarterback, I think, going forward with a little bit more added with his legs. I mean, given the weapons, the system, the swagger, like I like Joe Burrow, but he has just 260 rushing yards in his career so far. So, and it feels like lucky that he has a handful of touchdowns on such little, attempts and yards. Anyways, I say that because he kind of falls on the wrong side of that Mendoza line when it comes to adding with your legs and stuff, meaning you need Burrow to put up some gaudy statistics passing the ball. Like you mentioned, he's done that to his credit. And especially that 70% accuracy, like that's just hard to maintain. And that could have a little bit to do with the Bengals being more run heavy and catching teams a little bit off guard, I think, this year. So, and speaking of hard to maintain, is Joe Burrow increased his touchdown rate from 3.2% to 6.5% this year. That is definitely hard to repeat year to year, unless your name's Russell Wilson. Don't get me started. But, long story short, Joe Burrow ranked what it is. So I think heading into 2022, not only could he possibly get overdrafted, in my opinion, unless we think the Bengals are going to be like much worse. Maybe the Bengals actually end up with really tough outlier strength of schedule after winning the division next year. Who knows? But I'm saying Joe Burrow may need a solid uptick in volume to compensate for a possible dip in efficiency next year. He needs to throw the ball more in case he completes less passes, and less of those completed passes go for touchdowns. And volume's kind of actually always been quietly the name of the game for Joe Burrow. And so he averages over 24 fantasy points per game when he throws the ball over 30 times in a game during his career. A pretty modest number, just 30 times, compared to under 17 fantasy points per game in the 8 games he's failed to reach that pass attempt total. So yeah, where do I see him? Like right around that top 5 to top 10, but it's hard for me to get him into that elite tier.
Yeah, and I think like it's a very interesting question. Like you said, he's going to be under that microscope, and I think like if he's going to have like a quarterback 1 overall season, he really does need to have that spike 45 touchdown season where he does punch in those 5 touchdowns. But I do think, like I said, that's in his realm of possibilities. He's another guy who's coming off a devastating leg injury too. And I think he was a little bit more mobile at LSU than he's shown here. And that could be a product of the college competition as well. But I think he could be one of those guys that uses it in creative spots like Aaron Rodgers, like right in his heyday. So I'm looking for that from a little bit of Joe Burrow. And I think if he has that mega season, we're going to be reaping those rewards with where we might have to pay up to get him. Like with that Kyler Murray deal, if I could send Kyler Murray for Joe Burrow and like a strong running back 2 or something like that, I'd probably be all over that, because I think Joe Burrow can give us probably like 90% of what we might get out of Kyler Murray, just because I think that passing efficient and stay just because of the weapons that he's got around him, and especially Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, who profiles to me as a touchdown machine down the line. So I really
all
like
three
how
of those wide receivers are locked up right now.
Absolutely. So we're going to keep her moving, Ty, but we mentioned him, so I just want to talk about him real quick. Justin Herbert, obviously you have him right in that tier. And so I figure we would be remiss if we didn't touch on him here. Obviously we like him quite a bit. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the weapons around him. Of course, Keenan Allen he's not like super old. I think he's only around 30, but he seems pretty long in the tooth, and he's had some injuries mounting up as well. So do you want to throw a thought in there on Justin Herbert's outlook and what you've seen and what you think you'll see going forward?
I love Justin Herbert. I'm down with Brandon Staley big time. Like I like what's going on in that Chargers offense right now. Austin Eckler's free money, and I just think Justin Herbert adds with his legs. He can put up spiked weeks, so huge Justin Herbert fan. He's young and he's big and he throws good and he's got swagger and he can run the ball too. So I really like him. And Austin Eckler scored a lot of touchdowns this year, and maybe they just bring back a Justin Jackson. Maybe they go out and sign a back who can operate at the goal line, or draft another guy, because I don't think Roundtree or Kelly are the guys. What I'm saying is maybe Justin Herbert just keeps on scoring some rushing touchdowns though, because I feel like he's a hard guy to stop inside the 5-yard line.
Oh yeah, he's a pretty big boy. Like, he's lanky, but he's pretty big, and he's pretty quick for his size too. I just like how he deals it. Like, he throws ropes. He's got a rocket arm. His first 2 seasons are damn near historic. Really, he has both of his first 2 seasons over 30 passing touchdowns, which is incredible. Over 7 yards per attempt, which is good. Both of them over 4,300 yards, which is beautiful. So I think he has definitely taken it to another level than I thought he had in this offense, and he's really taken command of it, because Keenan Allen, Mike Williams are fantastic. Austin Eckler is great, but they really needed this quarterback piece to come in, and Justin Herbert has come in my opinion, exceeded expectations. So I think, like, depending on your opinion of the players, he should be one of those guys in startups that goes right around that Joe Burrow range, right around that Dak Prescott range. And I think you're just going to continue to see a stalwart in your lineups. You're talking about Dak being one of the highest floor quarterbacks. Justin Herbert is damn close to that as well. So definitely a big asset for those dynasty teams. We were talking about it earlier, taking the quarterback early on a dynasty team. And I think these guys are just perfect, because you don't want to be shuffling those guys in and out necessarily. I want to have one, maybe like a developmental Justin Fields on my bench in a dynasty league, depending on the roster sizes. But if I have a Herbert and like a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance, I am laughing at quarterback, and I don't even have to worry about that position. So I think that's why there is so much merit in going a little bit higher on the quarterback position, because of guys like Justin Herbert.
No, and he's definitely one of the guys I'm gonna single out. He might be the last guy on my list that I would take, before round 6 or whatever, in a startup. I was looking at it. Yeah, he's the first guy in NFL history to have 30 passing touchdowns in both of his first 2 seasons. Only 12 quarterbacks have ever done it one time in their first 2 seasons, thrown 30 touchdown passes. And yeah, first guy ever to do it in both seasons.
Pretty impressive stuff. So from the young gun in Justin Herbert, let's go to the old guard, talk a little bit of Aaron Rodgers. He's going to be a hot topic this coming off season, and not for COVID related reasons, because there is a high likelihood that he's going to be changing teams. And we haven't seen, well, obviously we saw Tom Brady change teams and Peyton Manning change teams a while before. Aaron Rodgers change right in that realm. Predecessor. Yeah, that's the vocab word. I like it. How much longer do you think we have of Aaron Rodgers, and do you think there's a chance he does come back to Green Bay, or do you think he's gone? So
I definitely think there's a chance, because I thought he's gone last year, but I don't know. I don't want Aaron Rodgers, really. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't want to buy that uncertainty, really. I don't think the situation in Green Bay is so ripe and amazing that he warrants, like, where he's going to go in fantasy drafts. I think he just holds too much name value, and like him or hate him or whatever, I just don't really like him for fantasy. Like, he falls in a tier of quarterbacks where I hope I already have my dynasty quarterback on my team. You know what I mean? And even if I've gone young or whatever, I don't think Rodgers is a quarterback I'd be targeting. I'd just wait a bunch of rounds and take Tom Brady or something. He seems like unshakable. Rodgers, like, I get it in his career arc so far, in his viewpoints, he's pretty set in his ways, but the drop off is coming. We've seen it. And, those drop offs happen swiftly and unmercifully for fantasy owners. So if there's risk associated with them, I just rather like swing for the fences with a clown like Deshawn Watson or something on my fantasy team. So definitely I'd go youth over Aaron Rodgers in that mid round of a startup, or even, if you have to start talking 4th, 5th round of a super flex startup or whatever, I'd take some of the rookies and all that before Aaron Rodgers. And like, as much as we propped up A-Rod during the fantasy playoffs here, fading Aaron Rodgers has always been like an annual exercise of mine in recent years during the offseason. So, not to be bullheaded, but I just don't see why this offseason is any different. And Jordan Love's still there in the wings. We'll see what happens with him. But it wouldn't surprise me if he's back in Green Bay. And I definitely think like Denver and some of those teams are very likely. And I don't think either spot will be worth it, even though it would be really amazing to see him in Denver with that skill set.
Oh, man.
With all those weapons.
Those weapons are deadly, and they just need one of those quarterbacks who can deal. And I think, like, in a situation like that, I think Aaron Rodgers could deal to give us a good season. Like, he had 48 touchdowns 2 years ago, and I would argue, like, Devontae Adams is the best weapon of either of those two teams, but I think overall, as kind of a depth of weapons, I would say that Denver might have the edge there with Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and KJ Ham, Dagler, and the two tight ends and stuff like that. Pretty good offensive line. Green Bay does too. And then solid young running back in Javonte Williams, and whatever happens with the Forgotten Spice Girl, Mel G. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But I think that also presents a window to sell high on Aaron Rodgers. Like, people see that name, like you said, they see him go to a team with a plethora of weapons. You could nab yourself one of these young quarterbacks and set your dynasty team up for the next 5 to 10 years to not have to touch that position. So look for the right opportunity to pounce. And I would say the best opportunity for that could bite you in the ass if he stays with Green Bay, but the best opportunity is as soon as he goes to a new team and gets that buzz with some new weapons and things like that would be when I would be looking to do it. But it's hard, because if that doesn't happen, you might get screwed. So I wouldn't fault anybody for going out and putting some offers out to send Aaron Rodgers to another team right now as well.
Yeah, and I don't even think this will be the last opportunity to sell Aaron Rodgers. You can probably sell him early next season as well.
Yeah, he'll come out with a 4-touchdown game where Cortland Sutton gets 2 or something, and then you can send him hard. What about Jordan Love? You mentioned him. Like, where do you have him ranked for Dynasty? I think that's a really interesting question. And like, what do you think about his outlook?
Yeah, I mean, outside of a super flex league, he's not going to be on a lot of rosters, I don't think. And that's why it's interesting. Like, he might be a good guy to stash or whatever that. And we haven't seen him prove much differently in the NFL so far, is that he's a very boom or bust guy, even from play to play, series to series, game to game, week to week, year to year. We've seen just inconsistencies in his game, but he does possess some of those higher end qualities, like the strong arm and the mobility and the size. So a very interesting football player. And I like him, like the Packers like him as their backup quarterback, I think. And, so maybe they think he's ready. I doubt that's the case. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't, even when Aaron Rodgers was being a little bitch in the offseason, you know, like, Jordan Love didn't seize that opportunity like some people thought he might in camps and stuff. So I like Jordan Love. I just don't think it's like hard to rank him. It's like semantics, almost like he's way buried in my ranks because he's not a starting quarterback. The day he becomes a starting quarterback, or if Aaron Rodgers was to be dealt, his value spikes, immensely. Yeah.
And I might look to sell Jordan Love in that situation as well.
I definitely would, I think. And like that we already see in Green Bay under LaFleur, it's a very run heavy scheme. It's a very run first mentality. The formations look like a run heavy team, but they're just passing the ball like they have Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and if that, like, to me, I've got him way behind any of the rookie quarterbacks from this year. Maybe not Davis Mills, right around the same tier, I guess. But if he does end up getting that starting job, and you could say trade him for like a Mac Jones or something, you absolutely hammer that. You're getting way more floor. You might miss out on a little bit of ceiling, but I think Jordan Love maybe only hits that ceiling 2 games in a season if he does get that starting job, because he's very mistake prone, very raw. I think some of that rushing could benefit him from a fantasy perspective because he's got that in his game, but I don't expect his passing work to kind of hold him up as a fantasy asset. So I think that's a pretty good assessment there, and a very hard one to just holding on to him and hoping is where I'm at this
super
point.
Flex is where I'd probably take a shot, because he does have like high end ceiling built into his his player profile almost. And Jordan Love comes with some of those upside qualities. So I think like trading a Matt Ryan to a contender for Jordan Love is like a play I'd definitely make in a super flex draft.
Totally.
Like a guy who has very little left in his career for a chance at Jordan Love being the starting quarterback in Green Bay going forward.
100%. Talk about some upside, guy or Ty. We're going to talk about this guy, and then we're going to start moving a little faster here. I'm going to start moseying through some of these guys, but Jalen Hurts from my Birds has had quite the season this year. He is a top 5 quarterback. And his outlook isn't so rosy. A lot of people do not like them some Jalen Hurts. I personally am kind of a little bit of an optimistic Eagles fan, but I do think that we've seen some really good play out of him. And I think that he is what he is, right? He's not going to hold up a 4,000-yard passing game. He's not going to hold up a 30 touchdown receiver room or anything like that. He's going to run the ball effectively. He's going to throw when he needs to, and hopefully not make a ton of mistakes. So I actually haven't minded what I've seen from Jalen Hurts. If they can just continue to build around him, I think he can be okay. I mean, he got him into the playoffs this year, and it was kind of an up and down season for the team, and lots of injuries along the offensive line once again. But what do you think about Jalen Hurts, and especially his job security? Because that's obviously the elephant in Jalen Hurts' room right now.
Yeah, it is. Like, it's a weird, I don't know. Like, I have him not as a top 12 quarterback. Like, the Eagles have, like you mentioned, the fewest pass attempts in all of football, and that's despite being without their running back one, Miles Sanders, like multiple points this year. And when the Eagles win games, like they've just run the ball more. And as much as, Jalen Hurts is the Eagles, what I mean? He needs to we need the team basically to show more confidence in Hurts' arm, in my opinion, before we can get fully behind him in dynasty settings. Like, he's fourth in expected fantasy points among all quarterbacks this season. He's 29th in fantasy points scored over expectation, which just really shows that he isn't cutting it as much as basically he's just not scoring as much fantasy points as he should. And it's similar chasm in terms of like air yards to completed air yards. Like, the conversion rates just really got awful there this year. But I would say he's probably my highest ranked quarterback in my dynasty rankings, whose job is less than secure, like less than certain, you know what I mean? And that's because the rushing appeal is so real. We saw it this season. Like, Hurts has been a top 12 quarterback in 11 of 15 games this season. That's pretty remarkable for a guy you don't have ranked as a top 12 quarterback in dynasty, who's young and a starting quarterback for a team. Like, he was the quarterback 2 overall after 7 weeks, lest we forget. But yeah, it has been a tale of two seasons for him. Like, Hurts has been the quarterback 11 since then, and just not offering the same advantage he did to gamers for that first 7 weeks, especially when you factor in like such a lackluster fantasy performance against the Giants in the fantasy football semis, and then kind of fell on his face in championship week against another poor pass defense in Washington. So I think Hurts has, he can be a game breaker, even for fantasy, week, like he can be a week winner almost, but I think he has a lot to prove as like a real life quarterback. And then the accuracy, the efficiency is just concerning. And so is the Eagles having so many draft picks in this draft coming up, right? So all of that makes it hard to say Jalen Hurts he's going to be a starting quarterback in 2022. Simple as that. So it's you're taking on a lot of risk, and in super flex leagues or whatever, I just can't really stomach that much risk. And yeah, if I did, it'd be a scenario where I try and get my hands on guys like Tom Brady, stuff like that late in a startup, guys who are being pushed down, but definitely have a good job, starting secure job.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think he probably does get that job, because I think if you build around him with that plethora of picks, that's a very advantageous situation as opposed to restarting at the quarterback's position. But again, maybe that's the optimistic Eagles fan in me.
Well,
right?
It's not the best class, so it's probably how they do go about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like Jalen Hurts is just he's done right by that team, you know what I mean? So like you said, it would be very nice to see the team kind of do right and trust in him. A little bit like the let Russ cook discussion. I don't think we want Jalen Hurts to be cooking to that magnitude necessarily.
No, Seattle's a pretty good comp for what our expectations should be with the volume and stuff.
So it's I think just the fact that he's the only quarterback in the top 12 under 200 or under 300 completions right now, almost 800 rushing yards, is just a testament to the floor that he provides without having that passing game. And so I think even if you were to move on in a trade or something like that, I think some team's probably going to give him a shot. And a guy who runs like that and gets a shot is a guy that I would put in a starting lineup. So I really like Jalen Hurts. I have him just outside my top 12, so I'm really close to having him there. And I think if he is secure in that role with the Eagles, I think I would probably bump him up into that top 12 if I know that he's going to be there after this season. Oh, gee whiz. I could go a lot on some Eagles players, Ty, but I will spare the folks that because I've talked quite a bit on this epi. So I want to fly a little bit. There's a couple of dudes that had interesting seasons. Tua, obviously, the Miami Dolphins had quite the slump after a good start this year. And Tua is a really tricky one to decipher too, because he had a couple of decent games where we saw what we wanted to see out of him, but most of the rest of the time it was pretty boring football from Tua, some mistakes here and there. I'm curious what you think his real fantasy football value is. And like, is he a guy who needs that Russell Wilson efficiency to be somebody you're interested in having as your quarterback one every single week?
I don't think he's ever going to have touchdown efficiency like that. Like, I think it was a pretty disappointing sophomore season from Tua. Like, and fuck him right now, basically. Like, he just killed folks in fantasy playoffs. Like, he was the quarterback 21 during those 3 weeks and just killed people in fantasy championship week in what was a dream get right scenario against the Titans. So yeah, we also saw the gross average depth of target, a lack of creativity from that offense overall in the passing game, fewer deep shots than we hoped for. Like, just the Dolphins team overall, I thought that completely just underperformed during the first half of the season. And yeah, like Jalen Waddle had a successful season, caught a ton of passes, but he was used in almost like a one-dimensional fashion, and Will Fuller got hurt. Stop me if you heard that.
Surprise. Yeah.
So we just never saw this team kind of come together, and Tua never had much of a run game. Like they didn't give him a ton of protection, and the Dolphins just couldn't get continuity built, I felt, the season on offense. So I think maybe there will be this built-in like optimism heading into next season. But yeah, like I think Waddle, Gesicki, these guys deserve a pat on the back for their seasons. But for Dynasty, I think you said it, there's a lot going on. Like he came into the league with sort of the injury tag attached to him, and he missed time again this season. And I worry about the ceiling is what I'm getting about the average depth of target and all that stuff, the touchdowns. He had just 4 top 12 performances all season long this year. So the Dolphins could be better next season, which I expect them to be. But that would come on the back of their defense. Not like the passing game. I want to expect more of what we saw this season from Tua next season, unfortunately. And that is unfortunate because that's like a 15-point per game quarterback at best in fantasy, which is not a guy you want on your roster.
Not good, Bob. Not good. The next guy is Carson Wentz. Obviously, first season in Indianapolis. I think it was a great situation for him because he came into an offense that rode the back of Jonathan Taylor, rode the wheels off of Jonathan Taylor, in fact, to his fantastic season. Carson Wentz, couple top 12 weeks, nothing spectacular. What are you doing with him in a dynasty league? Like, is he just kind of a middling quarterback too, and that's where he's going to be?
That's what he is in all formats at all times. Yeah, Wentz is a mid quarterback too. And there seems to be a truther army behind him a bit, even more so in like the fantasy community, as opposed to like there's a lot of guys, Ben's on that train hard, and
dog's name's Wentz.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of people who really like Carson Wentz. And heading into the final week of the season, I'm kind of interested to see what kind of recency bias is set in, because there was a lot of horn honking when it comes to Wentz in the first half of the year, rightfully so. But in the last 7 games, Wentz has scored under 16 fantasy points, in 6 of those games under 13 fantasy points in 5 of the last 7 games. So definitely crushed people down the stretch. As soon as they were in on Wentz, he did kind of what Wentz does. And a guy who, he's athletic and adds with his legs. I just don't ever want him running the ball. I kind of feel that way about Joe Burrow a little bit sometimes too, like just a car crash waiting to happen sometimes. So I think it's always ironic when people are saying, oh, they could add with their legs if they give him a little bit more. And it's like, well, I don't really want him running that much. And so I don't love Wentz.
Yeah. No.
Someone will love him more.
I love him, but I don't love him for fantasy necessarily, for all the things that you alluded. Like, he's the quarterback 15 on the season right now, but per game, he's the quarterback 21. So another not good Bob there. And he's scoring negative fantasy points over expectation per game. So he's not even getting up to like the 0, let alone coming into the black, as opposed to being in the red. So it's just one of those guys that's like a quarterback 2 on a super flex team, and you're okay to play the matchups with him and whoever's your quarterback 3, right? So you got some teams, you use them as your quarterback 2, but you're not selling them, you're not buying them,
and you're going to be banking on high end efficiency, right? Because Jonathan Taylor is there, and I just think that's going to be is going to run the ball, I think, a lot in Indianapolis.
Yeah. So I mentioned an elephant in the room earlier, Ty, and we have another one here in Deshaun Watson. It's definitely the elephant in the quarterback landscape room right now. All sorts of legal shit. I'm not even fully up to speed on exactly all the details of that. I'm just waiting for the guy to come back. But what do you think happens with him? Like, do you think something that could get delayed? I don't know how well versed you are in it, Ty, but
I don't even want to talk about it. Like, I think if he comes back and he's able to play in 2022, we have to not appreciate, but understand that he's a very extremely unique talent and something that's almost a cheat code for fantasy football, kind of like my argument for Kyler Murray. These guys who can run for 500 yards and guarantee 3,500 passing yards. We've never really seen stuff like this. And it's so conducive to fantasy. And he led the league in passing yards in 2020. And we know how dangerous he is with his legs. So, if the question is, where should we be drafting Deshaun Watson if we did a startup right now? The answer is probably whenever quarterbacks who we're looking at with a certain amount of a risk attached to them start coming off the board. That's where you can start taking them. So I don't know. Like I'm not calling him a top 12 quarterback in my rankings or anything. I don't think you should be paying. You should be following the news, trying to stay ahead of that market. And, I just hold right now or buy.
Yeah. I think if anything, you got to kind of buy it because some people might be soured and wondering what to do with him and not wanting to waste away on the roster. I think he has some football left. Like, obviously he's not going to just fade off into the dust. He'll probably be on another team other than the Houston Texans, but I think that's only good for him. We talked about Denver as a destination for Aaron Rodgers. Denver would be dreamy for Deshaun Watson. So I'd like that. He's a guy who gives you quarterback one overall upside any season that he is playing. So if I can get him kind of at the back, like you said, the back of that tier of those uncertain quarterbacks, I'd probably be hammering him in there because he just offers you something that they don't necessarily. Okay, so there's a bit of an unsexy crew coming up here, Ty. I'm going to kind of list off the crew, and then we're going to start with the top guy on the list. Jameis Winston is one of them. Interesting season with the Saints. Obviously, he had that major injury, and his future is uncertain. Kirk Cousins, uncertain. Derek Carr, who the hell knows? Baker Mayfield, holy shit. And then Matt Ryan, like, say goodnight. So I want to start with Jameis Winston first because I think he is kind of the most enigmatic out of that group for sure. What do you think happens with him? Do you have some interest for your Superflex squads? Do you think he's back in New Orleans? Do you think he goes somewhere to compete? What are you saying for famous Jameis?
I think Jameis will go to whoever will have him. He's on a one-year deal, so maybe he goes back with the Saints. I think that would almost be the ideal. It definitely would be. Like that would be the ideal. Or if Tom Brady, needs Tommy John surgery and they're like, oh, whatever, let's go. Yeah, why not? But I just thinking for fantasy reasons, because right now I have Jameis ranked as like my quarterback 30 in dynasty rank. That sounds like I'm putting him down big time, and I am. But the thing is that just shows how high he could rise. If he goes back to New Orleans, like I'm probably increasing his value significantly. If he goes somewhere like Tampa Bay, it'd be way up. But he can get into that mid quarterback 2 range if he just goes out and has a good preseason or is in a good situation. The hype could build for sure.
100%. I think he needs good weapons around him, or else he's just going to be throwing YOLO balls to practice squad players, and that's not a good situation. He needs guys that are going to help him out in the passing game. But I have him right where you do as the quarterback 30, just hinging on what happens with him, because I think can only really go up from there.
And these are the grossest names. Like there's no way I would ever touch these other guys in a dynasty league, like Jared Goff, Teddy Bridgewater, Matt Ryan, Baker Mayfield. Like I just would not touch these guys in dynasty right now. Definitely fits that mold right now. But yeah, if he's back in New Orleans, maybe I change my tune a bit.
Yeah, you might be the prettiest of the bunch. What about your boy Derek Carr? And I say your boy with utter sarcasm because Derek Carr is absolutely not your boy.
If you want to come in 3rd or 4th place for the next 10 years, take it. Derek Carr is your quarterback in a dynasty league. But even in a super flex league, like I'm just not super attracted to him. And I take Mac Jones, who might be a younger version of Derek Carr. Like you just, I don't think he's the right guy to be drafted.
Totally.
Sure.
And
I never will think that.
talk about floor. If you want to chase a season-long floor of the third or fourth finisher in your leagues, absolutely. But Derek Carr is definitely not going to get you there up to that number one spot. So you should not chase floor in that situation, folks. What about these guys? Like, we're getting pretty near the end here, Ty. There's two other a couple of guys that seem a little bit stuck in the mud are Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold. Daniel Jones brings some of that rushing upside. We've seen some of that from Sam Darnold, even though that wouldn't necessarily be like in his profile when you look at him. But do you have any interest in either of these guys in like a super flex league?
I mean, I have a little bit more interest in Daniel Jones because he's still with his original team who spent that pick on him. But at the same time, like, how long are the Giants going to do this where he's just really turning the ball over at an amazing rate? It's one of my arguments with Wentz, right? So I don't know about Daniel Jones. Like, he could, like, there's not a lot of options that I see being available to New York that make fiscal sense or whatever that they're going to be able to go with outside of Daniel Jones. So they might be running it back next year or until his rookie deal's out. And maybe he's just the next Sam Darnold, so to speak. But Daniel Jones possesses some of the tools we like in fantasy, and he does break off those big runs once in a while. He can run in a touchdown here and there. And he does have Kadarius Toney, Sterling Shepard, Kenny Golladay, Saquon Barkley, Evan Ingram is probably gone, but they have an array of weapons that aren't below average.
They're decent, not as bad as it seems,
and
right?
They could add a wide receiver there in the offseason.
Yeah, no, I hear that. Daniel Jones hater. Definitely will say that. Obviously, Eagles fan, but just all the mistakes that he makes. I think like this guy's like 2 seasons away from being kind of a shitty kind of journeyman backup. I would actually probably go Sam Darnold over Daniel Jones just because I don't think it's going to be in Carolina, but I think his age and kind of the perception of him coming out of college is going to get him some repeated shots. And I still think he has some talent where if he gets the pieces around him, he can make the most of those, not to like a top 12 level, but to like a top, top 15, top 18 quarterback. I think he could be that in the right situation. So I would are a factor in that one. But I think the thing that we really want to talk about are the rookie quarterbacks. And last week on our show, we did a Saturday matinee epi, which was a blast. And we talked a little bit about these rookie quarterbacks from like a week 17 fantasy championship perspective. So let's just kind of tack on to that as far as kind of a dynasty perspective. First, I would like to hear what your rank is for these quarterbacks in dynasty right now. Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and we'll include Davis Mills in that.
Yeah, so let's do tiers really quick because it would definitely be a clear tier for me with Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, and Justin Fields remaining in that first tier, just like pre-draft and all that process. Mm-hmm. Mac Jones, Zach Wilson are in a second tier for me, and then Davis Mills is below, and that's in Dynasty. And, you look at Davis Mills, he has a pretty clear path to starting, whereas Trey Lance might be battling and Justin, who knows? Anyways, totally. None of these guys are ranked as like top 10 quarterbacks for me, I don't think. Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields are all, I guess they are pretty close to that range. So back-end quarterback 1s, high-end quarterback 2s.
Yeah.
Hard to pair these guys in super flex drafts if you're on the 3-4 turn or something. Maybe not guys you're pairing together. Maybe you do have to, pick or choose, because obviously we want to try and take advantage of hit rates. Like, you're much more likely to hit on one of these guys if you take 2 of them. But it might be hard to do that if you want to win and compete right away in a dynasty super flex startup, because you'd be taking on a lot of risk. And it's possible that not even all these guys are starters in 2022 outside of Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, and maybe Zach Wilson, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I think like what's kind of slapped us in the face is the realization that we might have to play the long game with these guys a little bit. And I think that's kind of to your point that you're not necessarily going to want to pair 2 of these guys on your roster because you might get left with 0 of these guys. I have it very similar to you guys. I might put Mac Jones in his own tier and then Zach Wilson in his own tier as opposed to them being together. But it is very close. And I have Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, 8, 9, and 10 in my dynasty rankings. And we do say that these guys are back in quarterback 1s, but like I said, we're playing the long game. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting a quarterback or a top 12 quarterback season the next year, or maybe even the next 2 years out of these guys. So just kind of reset those expectations and realize that we're not going to see that ridiculous Trey Lance and Justin Fields rushing upside. We're not going to see Trevor Lawrence take over the Jags offense and turn them into a contending team right away. So just kind of reset those expectations. And I think you can still be happy with having these guys on your team, because I think in the long term, it's going to pan out. And there are profiles here that, even though we say they're not going to be top 12 quarterbacks in the next season or two, they have that in their realm of possibilities if things go right. And we've seen crazier things in the NFL. We've seen, we talked about Justin Herbert. He's taken the league by storm as a rookie. And these guys have a little bit of Konami on top of what Justin Herbert could offer as well. So I think, I'm not unhappy with what I've seen. I'm just resetting those expectations and getting ready to play that long game.
Yeah. Trey Lance and Justin Fields kind of remain the targets for me, even though I kind of do dislike a little bit what I've seen from Justin Fields in year one. But, there's a lot going on there, especially when it comes to that offensive line in the Windy City. So I think Trey Lance, Justin Fields will have similar arguments to be made for them next year, especially in redraft. I think they're going to be ranked higher than Trevor Lawrence for me, because one reason, they're going to offer that skill set that we chase, that we covet, the rushing upside. They're the late round quarterbacks that we're going to be targeting again. And that's why they were attractive this year, is because you can't find that Lamar, that Kyler, that skill set doesn't exist in the 9th, 10th, 11th round of drafts anymore. You've had to pay up for it this last year, and especially in 2021. Yeah. And next year, I think it's going to be a similar story, where these guys are pretty much the guys that we're honing in on it later on in drafts, who could offer those big spiked weeks.
Totally. And it's kind of like what we said. It's kind of like what we said about Jalen Hurts coming into the season, right?
Exactly.
He's the last.
Hurts was that guy.
The last of those guys that offers you that. And
but even he was an 8th
off.
round pick. He was even an 8th round pick. And that's probably where someone like Trey Lance, Justin Fields will be, even in best balls in post draft, as long as, they don't sign a free agent quarterback or something. And maybe Jimmy Garoppolo, we'll see what happens with those guys. But if it looks like those guys are the starters by, say, April, May, June, when best balls are starting to fire up, get heaty. I think those guys will be in conversations of where Jalen Hurts was going last year, Josh
Allen. I would happily, if I knew Trey Lance was starting for the San Francisco 49ers, I would happily take him in that range, because he's going to be a top 12 quarterback, almost guaranteed. We just need to know that he's ready and that he's got the starting job. And we saw some of that with that start that he had this past week. The guy is a tank, and he runs fast. We like that.
And I'm not saying people are buying or sell. Buying would probably be the play, because you didn't have to spend the 102 or 103, kind of the high prices for the Fields and the Trey Lances. But I'll tell you that when that happens, they'll definitely increase in value. Or say, Chicago finally kills the beast and fires Nagy and these guys. That'll be a boost for, they should clean house, pace everybody. And that would probably increase Justin Fields' value, correctly or incorrectly. The value in the market for Fields will increase.
No, I believe you, because you look at the two and they offer some of the same upside, but obviously Trey Lance is in a prime position and Justin Fields is in the middle of in the epicenter of dysfunction, essentially. Kind of like Trevor Lawrence too, but
I think guys are going to have to be learning their second playbook in their second season.
For sure. So I think that better days are ahead for those guys. So don't necessarily just sell off, especially if you paid that 101 or 102. I'm holding the shit out of those guys, because you're going to get something back, in my opinion. All right, dude. Well, that's all we got for tonight's episode. Nice, tidy little hour and 7. Was a fun one. Always nice to get together. Love that we're doing these in person and pre-record in the fantasy layer. It's a blast, man. It's nice to kick it with you, and it's just nice to have kind of the dope little in-person pod setup. So I appreciate you getting this all done on Thursday night, and it's going to be a great season for the True North Pod. So we're really looking forward to it. Really thankful for any of the people who check out our content, because we're going to keep her rolling. We might take a couple weeks off after we do the State of the Union series here, just to get prepped for the off season. But we might not as well. It really depends.
We could do some short videos in there. We'll do something.
Yeah, we got lots of ideas for content for the True North kind of content machine. So if you have any ideas or anything you'd like to see us do, you are the ones who we want to please. Essentially, we want to give you what you need to get better at fantasy football. So if you've watched us and you know kind of how we operate and you think there's something that we could really offer and that we haven't quite yet, please let us know. We will never not take kindly to people checking us out. And we feel like if you are giving us suggestions, that just means that you care and you want to listen to more of what we have to offer. So really, really appreciate that. And make sure that you go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Smash the subscribe button, beam, 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 and hit the little bell to get the icon when our shows are on, because it's 4 shows a week, folks. So 4 shows a week, folks. And we are a very all-encompassing team, in my very humble opinion. So yeah, give some love to the rest of the team as well, because they're putting in good work just like we are. But thanks, Ty. Any parting shots for the people?
Nope.
All right. Okay. Yeah, man of few words. I like it. Until
Talked enough tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I'm hurting a little bit.
I always feel like I talk too much.
Me too. But that's kind of what we're here to do. So I guess it's okay. It's okay. Until next week, at True North FFB on the socials. TrueNorthFFB.com is the website. Fantasy Points Media Group. Please go check out that early bird trophy smack. The promo code is TNFF. You can see the hardware here. And for those of you who just got the worms in your fantasy league, go get one of those and level up your league with the promo code TNFF. It's a free championship ring with the purchase of a belt or a trophy. And then, of course, Monkey Knife Fight, who is our YouTube title sponsor, TNFF. Instant match on your first deposit up to 100. Talk about talking a lot, Ty. That was a good spiel. But until next week, we love you all. Thank you so much for checking it out. Peace.